Let's plan a boudoir photo shoot. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Bird with Reality Reimagined. I'm an award-winning photographer and Photoshop artist that specializes in fantasy composite art. But we're not going to talk about fantasy composite art today. We're going to talk about boudoir photography and why. Because I have a boudoir shoot coming up in 2 weeks. I need to plan for it, and I thought, hey, I should share my entire planning process with all of you, and not just specifically how I plan for a boudoir photography session, but how I plan all of my sessions. How I build the mood and the story and the art and make it a success before I ever pick up the camera, pack up the lights, and go to the location. Before we dive into the core content of this video, I want to talk about a couple of things very briefly at the top. First, I want to talk about some of my plans for my channel on YouTube going forward, and then I want to talk about why I'm getting into boudoir photography. There are also time codes, so you can skip ahead and go past this content and get to the core of it if you wish. My plans going forward with the channel. When I started the channel, it was all about creating one-off content in Photoshop and photography and passing on the knowledge that I have. And that's certainly fine. I'm going to continue doing that. But my worry and concern is this. When you are thinking about stepping into something like boudoir photography, and you go to the YouTube platform, you type in the keywords, how to do the boudoir photographies, you're going to get a whole bunch of different content creators who are going to give you one-off ideas based upon their experiences. And then you're going to go back to YouTube and type in keywords like how to pose a subject for boudoir photography, how to light for boudoir, how to, and you're going to get all this random information that you have to somehow push down into an amalgamation of what you think you're supposed to be doing. And find the inspirations, take the bits of information you need to make it your own. There's no through line in that process. And that's what I want to change. I will certainly bring the one-off tutorials in Photoshop and photography, but I want to start sharing my through line of my experiences as a professional photographer. So that if you come to my channel and spend time here, you can follow along my entire process, planning a photo shoot, working with the client on set, behind the scenes, setting up the lights, editing the images, selling the product to them in IPS, so that this entire experience of photography can be something that you can watch as I go through it naturally as a part of my job. So that's the content I'm bringing forward, and it's beginning now with me sharing how I'm planning for this upcoming shoot. Now let's talk about boudoir photography and why I'm getting into it. I've certainly done boudoir in the past, and I've done classic boudoir. I've tried to add fantasy elements to it to fit the brand of Reality Reimagined. When I got my start long ago, I started with weddings, and so we had as a supplemental session that they could add to their package was a boudoir session. And ultimately, I was just never very comfortable with it, and I want to briefly explain why. I was uncomfortable with it because I felt like I didn't have a voice to speak to the client artistically about what they wanted out of the shoot. I could certainly have a consultation and figure out certain things they wanted to see and ask them leading questions and surveys and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I was not able to step into, the typical client was a female. I was not able to step into their skin and to understand the things they've been through, the pressures that have been put onto them by society and beauty standards and body shapes and so forth. So to find a way to create empowerment and to pass that along or to help celebrate that with the client, I just didn't think I was able to do that. But over the years, I've had a lot of female subjects, clients, and people just tell me that they like how I portray women in my artwork. That it's about creating certainly a sense of sensuality, but I do not sexually objectify them. I don't try to put them into positions that would be typical of what you would see from that sexual objectification. I'm about telling their story. I'm about seeing the inherent power within a human being, their courage and their strengths, especially when it comes to doing something as daunting as boudoir photography. So if I am to have a unique voice in this, which I think I do because I take these folks at face value, then this is something that's worth exploring. To be able to help create that impact in that art making, in this experience of photography for those clients, in the same way that I want to be able to create that through line and impact for you and your education if you come to my channel on YouTube. So I have this shoot in 2 weeks to kind of explore some ideas. And because it's Reality Reimagined, and most likely I'm not going to do classic boudoir photography, it's going to involve things like swords and wings and elf ears and special effects and everything else. And I'm excited to go on that journey because, very briefly, back to my days in working in the theater as an actor, if you can put on a costume and become a character, you become more free to tell that story. And I'm curious to see if my regular paying clients coming in to do fantasy boudoir photography for Reality Reimagined will be able to step into that role, step into that character, and create something that they can be proud of. And I'm excited to be a part of all of that. So let's begin the core content of this video by diving into how I plan a photography shoot. And the first step for planning that is to visit my wonderful friend, Pinterest. So to get started with Pinterest, I simply type in the keywords of whatever the shoot is going to be about. So if my client's going to be an elf, then I'm going to type elven warrior cool fantasy art, and then it's going to curate a bunch of images, and I go on the inspiration hunt from there. So for this, I've simply typed in boudoir photography, and these are all the images that have come back, and this is where we will begin the inspiration hunt. Now, at the beginning, I want to say a couple disclaimers. One, I do not use Pinterest in the classic way that you're supposed to. I don't make boards anymore. I used to make boards long ago, and I don't now. I use Microsoft OneNote to curate all of the images and my thoughts and ideas and put it all together in Microsoft OneNote. I love OneNote. I've used it for a long time, and I'm going to show you in the next section how I put all this together in OneNote. But the geeky reason why I like OneNote is the way that you can actually type the copy into it and your thoughts and notes and indentations and bullet lists and stuff. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So I don't use boards classically anymore. Number two, when I look at these images, these are other artists' images. I'm going to use these images as inspiration, but I'm not going to copy and replicate every single thing that I see. It's been my stance since the beginning that I will not replicate what I see. Certain aspects of it, yes. If there's a prop or a certain lighting pattern or clothing that is inspiring to me, I might try to find something similar so that I can get into that original source of inspiration of what I see in the art, but I won't replicate it. And when we started with weddings, we would have brides say, hey, can I send you some Pinterest boards? And I would tell them, absolutely. I love the inspiration that can come from Pinterest, but I will not replicate what we see. I want to understand why these images are important to you so that we can create that visual dialogue and create our own unique art at your wedding. Same thing here. I want to be able to build the why of these inspirations, get that strategic planning to the shoot, and go through it systemically when we get to the shoot itself using Pinterest and using Microsoft OneNote. So let's dive in and start looking at the inspirations. And I want to say briefly too that these are artists' work. Whatever I say here, I'm not meaning any kind of negativity. I want to tell you why some images are not what I'm interested in doing with my boudoir photography going forward, and what about certain images that I do find interesting. So starting at the beginning, I'm looking at some of these images, like this silhouette immediately leaped out at me. Silhouettes are awesome. I love silhouettes. I think they're great. This image here, it's just not enough. It's not enough story to me. There's, of course, the visual eye candy that we can see, the woman's breast and the silhouette, but I can't, there's just not enough story. So this is about photography. This is a portrait in my mind, where we use a photography technique of silhouette to be able to capture the portrait, but I just don't have the story. And like the next image down here, this jumped out because of the silhouette to me. It's that classic pose that you would expect to see in boudoir if you are looking for basic boudoir posing. This is not a pose, by the way, that I'm interested in doing. It's just not interesting to me because it's about this shape, but there's not enough story. It's about the eye candy. And that's not enough for me. That's not what I want to do. Nothing wrong with the image, nothing wrong with what the artist has done. It's just not for me and what I'm looking for. But like this image here, this is a great example here. I love this image because she's looking off camera. And first and foremost, that's always exciting to me and enticing, because when you guide a subject to look off camera, the story becomes infinitely more impactful. What are they looking at? Why are they not looking at us? And there's all kinds of opportunity there. The clothing is not on her left shoulder. We get a little bit of cleavage and the legs and so forth. So we get to see a little bit of the body and so forth underneath. And that's impactful to me. And I've talked about this in a previous video, but go with me on this. Boudoir photography I've equated in the past to horror films. Continue with me on this journey here. The best horror films are the ones where you don't see the monster till the very end. So your imagination through that entire film, your imagination is making that monster 1,000 times worse than what it actually is. Same thing with boudoir and what I want to do. I don't want to start off by just blatant nudity or throwing it out there or throwing out as much eye candy as possible, because there's no buildup of anticipation of that story. So if we have a series of images and the audience is taking it in, if there's going to be implied nudity or partial nudity or full nudity, then that needs to happen at the end of the series of images. And we let the audience go on that journey through our photography in the same way they would go through it in a film. And the client in the same aspect. If the client is going to do any kind of nudity, they should do it at the end of the shoot. So they get to go through the process of getting comfortable and going through the experience and getting into their own skin and feeling that story and letting everything come out into play. And then if nudity is going to happen, it should happen at the end of the shoot so that the subject and the client are comfortable. You're comfortable as the image maker and the artist. And then the audience gets to have that same process of story systemically through the shoot. So I like this image. I'm definitely going to grab it and throw it into the OneNote and curate all of that and put it together. Let's continue looking at different images, and then we'll get into the OneNote and how I put all this information together so that we can do the shoot. Moving along, this image here, the heels. I like that one. Straight up, I love that one. And it's not about feet or whatever else, and nothing against the folks who find feet evocative. I like this because there's a lot we can do with the feet and the legs to start implying story. So her left foot is up off the ground, right? And the heel has not made complete contact. So let's use this image for a couple of things I just talked about. I love the reflection that we see on the ground. I like the lighting and so forth, but I'm not going to replicate this picture. I'm not going to write down notes, must have reflection and shiny floor and put light in front of subject. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm looking at this and I'm like, what if she raises that left foot up even higher so that her toes in the heel of the shoe are caressing the back of her calf a little bit? What if the heel's coming off of her foot? What if? And these are notes that I will write down so that when I'm at the shoot, I will guide my client to do precisely this with heels, flats, no shoes at all. And what can they do simply with their feet that starts building that anticipation of story? If the foot is lovingly and evocatively caressing the calf, like what can we infer from there in the story? And there's all kinds of shots that we can take simply with this inspiration in mind. So that'll definitely be an image that I throw into the OneNote. Moving along, I like some of these. Sure, they're looking at us. That light in the model's face here, that's kind of interesting, but it's not necessarily one I want to do. I like this one. I like her expression, but I'm not a fan of how it was obviously shot in a landscape orientation and then flipped vertically. Ooh, this picture here with the martini glass. Yeah, there's all kinds of storytelling there. Oh, this is it. This is the perfect example here. Look at this. This is, I mean, the index finger, the extended out, the martini glass, how the foot is up off the ground, the knee is flared back in, the thigh high, the chair, all of those aspects, not going to replicate it, but it's starting to tell story. And it's story that I like and I want to do in my brand. Because this is like, I imagine the story as the audience member looking at this and being like, hey, would you like me to join you? And she's like, no, I'm good. I've got all I need. And the martini glass comes into the shot. How cool is that? That's a story I want to tell. I like that. And this simple picture on Pinterest with these keywords of boudoir photography, this is how my imagination takes off. This is how I start forming the story. And this is the story that I will then write into the OneNote. And when I get to the shoot, before everybody gets there, I set up all the gear and then I go through that OneNote, go through that curated information and start reminding myself, okay, at this phase of the shoot, I want to do this. And the next phase of the shoot, I want to do this. And that's how I systemically approach a shoot that feels organic in its flow. And that's very important, and we'll get to that in the next part of this video. So I really like that image a lot, and I will grab that one and throw it into the OneNote. Now, one other thing, as I go through images in Pinterest, I try to find images that are in the same overall inspiration that I initially felt with one image. So this image here at the top, this one where she's looking off camera. As I continue to find images where I see an image where they're looking off camera or we can't really see the subject's eyes, I will grab that same image and put that into a certain section in the OneNote. And if I don't find enough images like that on Pinterest, then I will go back to the original image and actually click it. And if you click it, it'll take you to hopefully more images that are similar or have similar keywords so that you can start finding other aspects of inspiration for that one section of the shoot. So moving along, I love that picture with the martini glass. It's great. The mask that's not really doing it. These cool lights. That's interesting. The mirror. That's a neat shot. That's a neat reflection. And again, we get some eye candy. We get some sensuality. But what is this really about? It's a picture of the mirror, right? So nothing wrong with that. It's just not something that I want to do, and I'm not really interested in more silhouettes and so forth. Silhouettes getting hammered behind a glass. That's a curtain. That's great. Here we go. So here, these images right through here, and maybe this one too. This one's beautiful, but this is about art forms to me. And if I want to do suggest to the client, hey, let's do a series on just art forms, bodyscapes and art forms, then we would do that, but I'm not interested in that. But here, we don't see the subject's face. These are a great example of what I was talking about, silhouettes. There is all kinds of story here because we can see through the clothing. We can see their bodies. We can see them. It isn't just black and white silhouette, but there's sensuality in motion. It isn't, oh, look at my eye candy here, right? It isn't about that. It's about seeing, yes, we see little glimpses of the tush and body through the gauzy material and so forth, but there's story here. She's leaning against the wall, the pranced on point leg, which I'm not really into that. I know that like the long arms, the composition, this is a great shot, the one here, the chandelier and so forth, but it's not necessarily what I want to do. It's more about we get that stolen moment. We get to see the subject in their environment, in their story, and I like that, but we get that eye candy, we get that sensuality, we get the story, but it isn't just a blatant, here it is in the silhouette, and that's why I like those images, so I'll definitely grab those and pull those along. Same thing through here, seeing these like these silhouettes. Yes, this is kind of an abstract body shape here, which I don't think really makes too much sense because I want it to have a little bit more natural feel, at least for what I'm looking to capture. But this is an inspirational image. This fires the imagination. That's one I'll grab and put into the OneNote. I like this one as well. And that one, sure, we don't get to see her face, but it's not really that interested. Ooh, I love this one. Wow, look at that picture. That's beautiful. I want to click on it, but I'm trying to be protective on my YouTube channel because there's no nudity right now, and I don't need YouTube coming after me. So I'm not going to click on it, but I like that picture. And that's a picture that, this is what I was talking about. This picture here, we can't see her face, but we see enough. I love that short lighting. That's beautiful. The cascade, a little bit of the light on the breast, so we get a little bit of that evocative nature of it. This is an image that goes into the same vein with me, the same source of inspiration as this image here, because they have that same feeling, that the subject looking away, there's a half smile here, all of that. These are two images that I would put together and start building into the OneNote. So I think you understand why and what my method to the madness is when I go through Pinterest and how I'm looking at some of these images and how they are the leaping off point. So what I want to do now is I'm actually going to go through and grab a bunch of images, put them into the OneNote, and put together all of my thoughts and show you that final part of this video where I curate all the images, get the structure together so that I can systemically approach the shoot in an organic kind of flow and create some beautiful artwork and storytelling with my clients. So let's move into the next section of the video and jump into Microsoft OneNote. So let's finish the adventure today by going through my curated images, my notes of each sequence and how I want to shoot it in Microsoft OneNote where the whole thing is planned out. I love Microsoft OneNote, as I said a moment ago, because again, how you can use the bulleted system, and as you create a bullet and you tab in, it creates a new bullet and so forth. This isn't rocket science in the realm of word processors that have been around for a long time. I just like OneNote. I like how it syncs. It works for me. If Pinterest has this ability built into it, that's awesome. You can let me know in the comments. For sure, I'll take a look at it, but I kind of like how I have this set up. So, you know, if there's something cool out there and you need to tell me about it, please let me know in the comments below. So starting with the first sequence, this first sequence is all about getting that subject, that client comfortable and helping to begin by telling them they don't have to look at the camera. And think about that. If they're getting their portrait taken in a various state of undress, this is already nervous and anxiety riddled photo shoot to begin with. Even if they're a pro and have done it a long time, it's the first time they're photographed from me, it's probably going to be a little bit nervous. I'll be a little bit nervous. So if they don't have to look at the camera, it's going to be able to give them that chance to start stepping into character and get that flow. And that's all that I'm looking for. That flow of story, they can get into that and start telling those little bits. So Essentially, here are the 3 images that I grabbed. These are not images I'm going to replicate. What I am pulling from each one of these, you'll see in my notes. So the notes that I've written here is this is the first sequence, and I always try to name the sequences so that I can keep it in that mindset of telling a story or a movie. So a la chapters, this is the first sequence, and I call it stolen moments. So no eye contact with camera unless it's a really cool shot. So I'm going to instruct the subject, don't look at the camera. But if they feel it, and I give them that sense of agency. If you're feeling it and you like the flow and you feel good and you're saying you like the shot, you like the way you feel, you want to look at the camera, go for it. But don't start that way. Look off camera, and I always use my hands. You've seen that in different videos where I tell them to actually look instead of saying, look left, look right, because they'll look anywhere but where you need their eyes to be looking at. So no eye contact with camera unless they're a really cool shot. 1 or 2 looks to camera at the end to tie into the final sequence, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. So short lighting with 2 light setup, key off camera left, and behind the subject, fill second light low. Let me describe what that is. So my key light, or my main light, the most powerful light on set, is going to be off camera left, and it's going to be behind the subject. So the light has to wrap around them to create that short lighting. And then I'm going to fill in the shadows with a second light, but have it on very low power. And then I wrote fill second light, low power, parabolic umbrella in parentheses, telling myself, go ahead and set up that second light with the parabolic. For the main key light, I will probably wind up using my 47-inch Octabox from Strobe Pro. Then final note, play with clothing off shoulders, tugging it, unbuttoning it, etc. So that I can give them something to do. Again, those nerves, that anxiety at the beginning of the shoot, if they have something to work with and something to play with, it will let them start getting into storytelling. It'll let them get some of that nervous energy out. It all fits into this first sequence, which is stolen moments. They don't have to feel like they're being photographed, because they're not looking at me. I'm giving them instruction. Instead of just hold your arm and think sexy thoughts, hold your arm, play with the button of the clothing, all this kind of stuff. They're not looking at camera. They get more comfortable. Second sequence is, and again, the inspiration image was this image with the martini glass. The second sequence is called props. So notes are wine glass or whiskey glass and bottle, and then I put as a subnote a cigar question mark. So we see martini glass and wine glasses in these images that I grabbed from Pinterest, but what if it's a whiskey glass? I love wine, red wine. I detest white wine, but I love red wine. Pinot Noir is my favorite, but whiskey and bourbon are kind of my drink of choice. And so I have some beautiful tumblers that I think would look lovely. And I do smoke an occasional cigar every now and again, especially when I'm having whiskey. So ultimately, should that be a prop? But I got to think about that, because the cigar, is that a male prop and it's only men smoke cigar and drink? Well, no, of course not. But is that going to fit to my subject? Is the subject a recovering alcoholic? Is the subject lost somebody to lung cancer? These are things that I need to talk to the subject or the client about when I start pitching the shoot and suggesting it. And these are things that I would do during the consultation when they book me. So we're going to have that conversation on the phone. I'm going to ask them some leading questions, start talking about story, and then ultimately I'm going to share some of these ideas with them and start just openly communicating, hey, what do you think about wine versus whiskey? No drinks at all. How about an apple juice box, or whatever it's going to be? And that gets them involved in the shoot, and they can plan and get that agency, as well as me being able to curate what I want to create here. Continuing with my notes for the second sequence: simple heels, no sparklies on the heels, no rhinestones, no jewelry, no nothing. I just want simple black heels. I don't want the audience's focus to be pulled away from that prop of whatever that glass is going to be, or that chosen drink. Full hose or thigh high question mark. Should they be wearing hose that goes all the way up to the waist, or is it just a thigh high? I'm sure there's a proper term for full hose. I just call it full hose. So it's a question that I want to ask the client. Do you have the full hose that goes all the way up, the thigh highs? Oh, I've got my favorite pair of thigh highs. I love it. Okay, great. That's what we'll do. Can the glass be used to block naughty parts? That's self-explanatory. Lighting. I want to do Rembrandt, and I said I think. So Rembrandt lighting pattern. Natural light for the key light, if there's available natural light, was a subnote that I put into that. So if I do the Rembrandt lighting, I'm going to have to use my strobes that I have, and I just got some 8300s that I'm really excited to work with. But if there's a lot of good natural light at the location, then perhaps the natural light can be the key light, that main light, and then use a parabolic to fill in. And then as I look at these and I think about the props, and the props are a center focal point for the audience's attention, then I made a lens choice and wrote the note and said, lens, definitely use the Canon RF50 1.2, so that we really get that shallow depth of field and everything falls off in focus, so we can really fine tune the audience's focus to those areas where we need to be. And I want this overall to be the second sequence. Why? Because again, the subject has props to work with. The subject is not looking at the camera. Half the time we're going to be potentially photographing their legs and their hands or their hips and not really showing their face, so they can get comfortable. But I don't want to start with these images at the very beginning. Why? Because I need them to know they're going to be photographed and their face is going to be in the image. But this is another sequence to ease them into that storytelling, to ease them into the flow of this and let those natural emotions come into play. Moving into the third sequence. Third sequence I called see-through. Sheer material is needed for this, that they can get wet, maybe. That they can get wet, and then I put in parentheses maybe, because it's cold in Arizona right now. It's in the winter months, and I know other parts of the United States are freezing with, you know, sub-zero temperatures, but in Arizona 40, 50 degrees is quite cold for us. So anyway, the sheer material, if you can get wet, that's great, because the location we're going to does have a pool. It can be heated, but for this shoot, it will not be. So if I can get them into the water very quickly, then I may try to replicate some of that first spec image that we saw. That was an inspiration. If they've got the sheer material of a shirt or a dress or, you know, a nightgown or something along those lines, then great. If they don't, then we may not even do the sequence at all. So that's something that I have to ask them during that consultation to make sure. I wrote some notes about the lighting, all natural light, no flash or reflector, because I want that natural light to really help to intrinsically tell the story here, of some of that silhouette kind of feeling a little bit and seeing through stuff without trying to balance flashes and all that good stuff. And then I wrote a lens choice of the RF 50 millimeter 1.2, because again, I think some shallow depth of field might be in order. Fourth sequence. This one, I didn't give it a title, and I called it Maybe, and essentially said I may not do this fourth sequence. Now, this fourth sequence is all about silhouettes, and I love silhouettes. I think they're very powerful, but I don't know if I want to do that or not in this shoot. So I wrote some notes of fourth sequence maybe. Need one solid room at the location that this makes sense to light for silhouettes, and that's the reason why I may not do this. I don't want to just do a silhouette for the sake of doing a silhouette. The room has got to have some kind of aspect that fits into it. So again, that first inspirational image that we saw of the woman in the door frame with the very abstract pose, we see the bed in the background and so forth. Yes, that adds a little bit to the story, but I need that room. The second image where the woman is putting on lipstick, I think that's a lovely image. And this is the kind of storytelling I would want to do if I do these silhouettes. The background has some substance. There's just enough detail in the shadow so we can make out the subject. It isn't a pure black and white silhouette. So that fourth sequence may do. I wrote the notes. No window silhouettes. It's got to be a room. Fill the shadows for F's sake, because I don't really like pure black and white silhouette. I like the door image. Just make more natural posing. Maybe bring in a prop or two, question mark. Blast the room with a bare bulb, full power behind the subject. Fill with a parabolic on low. I'm writing notes to myself about lighting. Why am I doing that? I know to do that. That's fine. When you're at a shoot and you've been shooting for an hour or two, you're tired, you're trying to beat the clock, you're worn out, and the subject, all those kinds of things, you're thinking about a bazillion things. You don't want to have to remember that subtle thing. Just look at your notes. And the subject's changing clothes, they're going potty, they're getting a drink of water, you're changing some lighting gear, pull out your phone. And this is why I like to use Microsoft OneNote. Pull out your phone, look at your notes, and then move on. So I'm telling myself how to set up the lights, because this is the fourth of 5 sequences. At this point, I may be tired, so I'm helping myself out. Lens choice, the Canon RF 24 to 70 millimeter to f2.8 lens that I have, because I do want detail in this. I don't want this to be a shallow depth of field kind of thing. Moving into the final sequence, and I referenced this at the very top in that first sequence. The final sequence I call direct address. That's a term from the world of theater and playwriting where a character on stage will make a direct address to the audience, where they actually look at the audience and talk directly to them. And usually it's because they're going to pass along some exposition and secrets within the story that they know as the character that the other characters don't. And that's a whole bunch of knowledge throwing out there, but it has an importance here. I don't want to just say, well, just look at the camera and look powerful. I'm using these ideas of direct address, and I would tell this to the subject and tell this to the client, but very briefly, saying, hey, you've ever seen a movie or a play where that subject, the narrator, starts talking directly to the audience? It's because they know something. They know something secret that they want to share with the audience, but they're not sharing with the rest of the characters in the story. So when you look at this camera, when you connect with me, tell us that secret. Don't actually tell me out loud, keep your secrets, but tell me in your eyes, tell me in your expression, your body language, tell us that secret, that direct address. And that bit of guidance is everything. It makes the subject and the client feel comfortable. They've been given direction. They know what to do. And that's a lot better, isn't it, than you telling them, look at the camera and look sexy, look naughty, like, ooh, fierce and naughty. No, give them that idea. There's something that you know, that we have to know, and relish in the joy that you'll take your time telling us that secret. That gives them all of that fun stuff and emotion to play with, and I love it. That's why I'm calling it the direct address. So my notes, start with full portrait mode if client is there in feeling, meaning treat this as a full portrait session and let them really come to the camera and connect with their eyes if they're in that place, if they're in that mood. If they're worn out and they're tired and things of that nature, and you can sense that and read that in the room, then start with the second part, which is switch to close-ups. But continue notes with the first part. Start with full portrait mode if the client is there in feeling. Rembrandt lighting for sure. Parabolic for fill again. And lens choice is the Canon RF 24-70 f2.8 lens. Again, writing notes to myself about the lighting and the lens because this is the final shoot and I'm tired. So I got to rally all the energy together to really end the shoot in that powerful place. The second set of notes is switch to close-ups. And that's some of these images here that I curated. I love these images. They are beautiful, whether the client is looking away or not, or connecting to the lens. This is that second section that if they're a little bit tired, then I would start here and then give them that chance to take a break and come back strong to hit the final section of images as powerfully as they can. So the notes for switch to close-ups, the RF50, Canon RF50 1.2 millimeter prime lens, natural light, no flash if possible with the location. And then I wrote the final statement, it's all about the power. I'm not talking about the power of the lights or the lens. I'm talking about their power, their story, what we are trying to capture to tell that beautiful aspect of them, of my art and my work as a photographer. And that will be the subject of the final thoughts of this video that we're going to jump into right now. The final thoughts are simple. It's all about that power. It's all about the story. And that's why I want to do this as a genre potentially. Because if what I've heard from many people that tell me that they like the way that I portray women in my artwork, then if that's true and I need to take them at their word, then that makes me unique. It makes me, and it's not like, oh, pat myself on the back that I'm unique. No, it means that I have an opportunity to go further with the artwork and to make an impact and make a difference for the folks who are stepping into a genre of photography that's quite frightening. It's not very easy to take off all your clothes, look at the camera and be like, oh, I'm beautiful, right? And the folks who can do that and choose to go on that journey, I envy them. I applaud them. I think it's wonderful that they want to do that. And if I can create some impact and have some value as an artist to them, then I want to go on that journey and find out. The key takeaways, again, that I want you to look at this is I'm planning all of this story, all of this lighting, all of these ideas, and the shoot is 2 weeks away. So I challenge you with this. How often do you spend time planning out your photo shoots? And don't choke it to death with every intricate detail that must be followed on the day of the shoot. But how often do you go into a shoot going, well, yeah, the client's coming in at this time. I don't know. I'll take him to this location, that location. Maybe I'll bring this light and this lens and what. And you make it up as you go. I've been there many times. And sometimes I'm there because I have no other choice, because of schedules and timings. And I'm far too often in that place because I don't want to take the effort to make the most of the session. Take the time to plan these things out. Use Pinterest as an option. Use Google image searches. Do not replicate what you find. Use it as an inspiration and challenge yourself to look at it and go, what do I find in this story that's interesting that I want to hold on to that idea and expand it for my own artwork? Write down the notes of what you want to do and communicate this to your client, because that adds to the intrinsic value of your brand so that they feel more comfortable buying your top packages and spending top dollars with you, because you've shown them how important it is to tell their story. That ends this video for today. If you liked the content that you found in this video, then please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel, because new content debuts each week in photography and Photoshop education. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified of that new content when you return to the YouTubes. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, I'll see you out there in the world of Photoshop.